Welcome in, guys, to the Crash Course Metal Show. I am your host, Krash here, and we also got with us here Tony Webster from the Metal Command Show on YouTube. What is going on, my man?
How you doing?
Good, good. So,
Hanging out with you, talking about my favorite band of all time.
yes, and I'm pretty much right there with you. Helloween has been a very, very close band, near and dear to my heart ever since my young teenage years. But we will get into that. But first, we want to introduce Tony here. So, Tony, what's going on, brother? So now I did find you on YouTube, and you have your own YouTube channel. You interview Helloween, you interview Forbidden, you interview a lot of these heavier
Sure,
bands, but you also do have a foot in hair metal, as we talked pre-show.
sure,
But can you kind of just give a little bit of an introduction to yourself, Tony?
sure. So I started hosting the Metal Command show as a radio show back in 1998. The anniversary of the show was actually this past March. So it's been 27 years. So I ended up hosting it starting towards the end of the dark ages for heavy metal. And after about 25 years, I decided to go into the podcast realm, and that's how I ended up getting here. So the podcast is very new. It's not really hasn't been around that long, and I've interviewed every band from Iron Maiden to everybody, bands in your backyard you never heard of. So it's just been one of those things. I mean, even one of the bands in the poster, it was a long time ago, but I interviewed Cinderella once. I interviewed Tom Kiefer, and it was a long time ago, but incredibly nice guy. And he came on my show live, actually, which wasn't common because the show used to air 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. on a Friday night. But he came on at like midnight, which was really bizarre. But
That's awesome, though. Yeah,
yeah, it's a long time ago. It was a long time ago, but it was cool. He was a really incredibly pretty intelligent guy too. That was the one thing I liked about him. So that's when the show started, and I ended up over the years, getting to know a lot of people from a lot of different bands. Some of those bands I'm still friends with today. The Helloween being one of them, as people already know, because I did host their website from about early 99 to about, I kind of really stopped and got out of that about 2007, 2006, somewhere around there. But definitely my favorite band of all time. Incredible group of guys, if you get to know them. You talked earlier about the Andi Deris Era. Either people love it or hate it. I think a lot more people love it, and we'll get into more of that. I think there's many more people love it more than hate it, and we'll get into that when we start talking about the albums. But definitely an incredible vocalist, incredible singer. A really, really incredibly nice guy. If you ever, watch interviews with him, or if you ever hear about the other band members talk about him, they always speak highly of him. But super nice guy. And we can go into how I met them and how that whole thing happened. When we get into Better Than Raw, we'll talk a bit about that. But those guys are really cool, and incredibly great people, great songwriters. And there's always that saying that if you meet your heroes, you're going to be disappointed. And I'll be honest with you, I wasn't disappointed.
That's awesome. That's always a good thing. That's always a big positive in my book. Sometimes you're right, and many people have examples of that. When you meet your heroes, sometimes
I have
disappointed.
plenty of examples, but just not them.
Tony, let us jump in here, and we're gonna do the Andi Deris era when he first joined Helloween. So what we are going to be doing with our four squared here, we're going to rank these four albums. We're going to discuss each one as well here first. So first we have Master of the Rings from 1994. Time of the Oath from 96, and then we have Better Than Raw from 98, and we have The Dark Ride finishing out in the 2000s, or in 2000. So, Tony, let us jump in here to Master of the Rings, and talk to me a little bit about this album.
So that record is interesting, and if you go and listen to or watch the interview I did with Andi, we were talking about him joining the band and talking about that record specifically. But when you look at it, the band, when that album came out, when Andi joined the band had hit pretty much rock bottom at that point. You had the lawsuit with Noise, Pink Bubbles didn't do well, Chameleon really didn't do well. And, while those two albums have since, over the course of time, more people like them, back then they did not.
Yes.
So here comes Andi Deris, and a guy who completely accomplished a feat very few people do. Not only did he replace one of the best singers in heavy metal history, and Andy will tell you that Michael Kiske and Jeff Tate are probably the two best singers for this kind of music. But the guy's voice sounds completely different, yet they were able to be successful. And that album came at the very beginning of his era, and they became one of the most consistent heavy metal bands of all time. So if you look back then, if you look at the dynamics of what was going on back then, when I say Chameleon, they'd hit like an all-time low. I believe that album might have sold I'd like to say about 200,000 copies, which if they did that now, it would be a little bit different. But right. like back then, that was considered a failure to like bigger labels because they were on EMI. So what ended up happening was you ended up having Andi join the band. Now at the time, obviously Andi had been in Pink Cream 69. That band was pretty successful. So what you had is a lot of the dedicated Helloween fans that still existed, but then a lot of, like everybody does, you have a musician you love, you follow them to the next band. And so you had a combination of Andi Deris fans go over there. And so what you did is you had kind of a foundation to where the band they kind of started over in a sense. Right. With two new members, you ended up getting Uli in the band, who was in Gamma Ray and Holy Moses and played in a variety. He played in a lot of thrash bands, actually, before power metal. And you ended up getting this lineup, and they recorded and wrote the album in 3 weeks, which is crazy.
Okay, I didn't know that. Yeah.
But the thing is, with that album, if you listen to it and you listen to the production, if you go through the 90s albums that they did, better, like when you get to Time of the Oath, it's got more of that stripped down old school feel to it.
Yes.
Better Than Raw and The Dark Ride have a more produced feel to it, but Master of the Rings has more of a live feel to it. And that is because, the short recording time. And actually, I wouldn't even change anything of how that album sounded. But it was a very important album for the band to reestablish themselves. So, you had instant musical chemistry on it. When I look back at that album, the songs that Andi and Wyke wrote are absolutely just mind-blowingly phenomenal. And that album, even though I think Roland Grappow, his best songs were on Pink Bubbles Go Ape, that album actually has my favorite song he ever wrote for the band, which is Still We Go.
Okay.
But as a group, I always think that Pink Bubbles was his strongest album, but I think Still We Go is my favorite song that he wrote with the band. And interestingly enough, everybody knows Roland from the 90s playing like, shredding guitar and playing a Fender, but actually I believe he used a Gibson on that one song for that album.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So when they put that album out, one of the ways they were marketing that record is they had a lot of different special editions of it. So you had, special covers, a special slipcase edition. You might have had one with a couple bonus tracks. I mean, there's tons of them out there.
Right.
And then in the US, about a year later, they ended up releasing it in the United States with a second disc with the bonus track, all the bonus tracks and B-sides.
Okay.
Yeah. So they released Soul Survivor as a single. Perfect Gentleman was a single. Mr. Ego was a single. And Where the Rain Grows was a single, which all of those are sitting right here. So Soul Survivor. And you had a lot of bonus tracks on it too. The one thing I think that's cool about it, with every Helloween album, you have, one track that you think, man, that could have made the record. So Can't Fight Your Desire, I think, would have fit on the record.
Okay.
They probably ran out of room. And, when they came out with the version on vinyl, because I don't think it was originally released on vinyl back then, they had to change up the track listing a little bit. And it would have been cool if they would have just thrown that song on there at the end. But nevertheless, the bonus tracks were really cool. They had a Thin Lizzy covered with Cold Sweat. They had Roland singing on the Grand Funk Railroad song, which was Closer to Home. And for those that don't know, Roland Grappow was actually a big fan of a lot of the 70s hard rock, like Kansas Sticks. Foreigner's a big influence on him. Grand Funk Railroad was a big influence on him. And, so he did that. And the bonus tracks were really good on that record. You had Grapowski's Malm Suite, which was kind of a spoof on Yngwie. if I remember correctly.
Right.
But the record really was not only great, but it really ended up helping to really jumpstart and restart the band. And, I consider the 90s kind of the rebuilding era for them because
Mhm.
they were rebuilding their audience and they were doing this at the worst time for this kind of music. I mean, it wasn't like, heavy metal wasn't liked at all here.
Yeah. Yep.
And they were doing this at the worst time that you
I
could
agree.
possibly do that. And they were still successful. So that was the beginning of the Andi Deris era and the beginning of 30 years of consistency. I think he is probably one of the most important people to ever join that band and restarting them. And Wyke will tell you it's the American album because he felt that it had more of that American feel to it.
Yeah.
So,
I could certainly hear that to it because this one, I will say each of these four albums sound different than the other, along
mhm,
with like you said about the production, but just also like songwriting a little bit, just on how even
sure.
Andy feels, or how he sounds. But I gotta say though, this because I always liked now when I was a young teenager in high school, I loved Helloween, all eras of Helloween. But I will say
Mhm,
Kissgate is like I always thought was the superior era. But man, Andy did an amazing job. I'll just say that right now. Like
mhm,
just throughout, just keeping it alive, like you said, and restarting somewhat the band. And like you said, this is 1994, so this is the worst time to be restarting any kind of traditional
yeah,
style of metal. You know, but I remember seeing the video for like on YouTube, like, years later, Where the Rain Grows, the music video for that. I love that song. The Perfect Gentleman, same thing. Great music video. This album is just different from what even they did before. Cause like I absolutely love Helloween and Pink
mhm,
Velvet Go Ape, but it's different from that. It still has a power metal feel to it. Still has a
yep.
metal edge to it, but has a little bit of the stuff that they did beforehand. And then also too, after this, they don't really visit this style too much. I would say this album, it kind of stands on its own. It has
Yeah.
its own certain sound to it.
Well, the best way to describe Helloween is the way that Sasha described it. There's an interview with him from myself and with myself, and it was a couple years ago now. But the best way to describe them is Helloween has always been, and if you go back and listen to them from the, all the way through their entire discography, they
Mhm.
have always been a band that has had epic power metal songs with just regular rock songs mixed in with it.
Yes.
And that's really what they've always been. Now, I think Andy's voice being a lot different,
Mhm.
I think actually ended up working in their favor, and the fact he's a very skilled songwriter.
Right.
And one of the things that when you look at some of the stuff, even on the last self-titled album, I mean, some of the songs he wrote on there are incredible. Michael Kiske has even said that Andy's a great songwriter. And
Mhm.
the other thing is he's a great dude. I mean, he's a very easy guy, a very easygoing guy to pretty much get along with for the most part. But him and we've deep dived on a lot of that stuff over the years on the radio show and here. But definitely an incredible album. And a fun fact, my original fan site before I actually did their website was called Where the Rain Grows. So
Nice. Okay.
uh,
Very cool.
and I also want to throw in something else. When we speaking of that, there is a misconception. Everybody thinks I get these messages, man, thinking that I am the one that created the first ever Helloween website because I created my website in 1997, but I
Okay.
definitely was not. And the reason people confuse that with me is that the guy who actually created the first ever website on the internet, he created it in 1995. His name was Chris Scarrett, and he was also from my area.
Okay.
And so people always confuse that. But Chris had a page called Future World. That's actually how I ended up
Ah,
getting a lot of my information on the band. And he actually created the first ever Helloween website. So it was created here in Cleveland first, but it was not by me.
okay.
A lot of
Interesting.
people, yeah. So
All
fun
right.
fact for you there.
All right. That's cool. Now, I want to ask you something here with since Andy came over from Pink Cream 69, do you think there's a little bit of that feel on this album? Like a Pink
Yeah,
Cream 69 feel?
yeah. I would say Andy has a certain style of songwriting.
Hmm.
I can tell you like I could hear if you gave me a Helloween album when this next album comes out, once I hear it, if I don't even look at who wrote the songs, I can usually tell whether it's him. So with that, with the Master of the Rings, yeah, there's definitely some of that style in
Okay.
there. I mean, in the middle of a heartbeat would be something you'd probably hear Pink Cream do.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
Pink Perfect Gentleman could be something
Oh
that
yeah.
Pink
Yeah.
Cream could have done. You
Why
know,
even?
yeah, and the thing is, if you think about it, Perfect Gentleman, Soul Survivor, I mean, those two songs have been pretty consistent in their set. And they've always played those. Why was also in their set off and on over the years. But yeah, there's definitely that feel. And even now you have a little bit of that, but obviously he's progressed since then.
Yeah.
He does write some pretty heavy material, as we'll talk about on the next album.
Mm-hmm.
But generally speaking, yeah, you have a lot of that influence in it. And again, like I said, you had a lot of people. Pink Cream was a pretty successful band in Europe and Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Yet when he left, you had a lot of people that followed him over there. I remember when I was running the website, people would email me and say, "Yeah, I've been following Andi since the first Pink Cream '69 album." So there were definitely a lot of people there.
Okay.
And the fact they made an incredible record like Master of the Rings is what really helped solidify, really give them a fan base, and they just built the fan base up from there.
Yeah. I can certainly see that because, and like you said, you brought some Pink Cream fans over from Andi, but
Mhm.
you also still had your diehard Helloween fans that were like, it can't get at the time, it can't get any worse than what we just had the last two albums with Pink Bubbles
Yeah.
Grape and Chameleon. So I think that's why, like, over the years, like, Helloween has stayed so strong as far as like being kind of like not necessarily in the limelight, but they are popular. For like any band would kill to have their popularity. Especially internationally.
Yeah, I think what's really helped with the consistency is that they have had no band turnover since
Mhm.
2005.
Okay,
You
yeah,
added people, but you
right,
haven't really subtracted anybody, and that is what has really led to consistency. So, with bands, you need three things technically. You need to be able to get along. You have to
mhm,
have the right people in the band. Talent alone is not going to do it. They have to be talented, and as people, you have to be able to work with them and get along with them. You have to have the music, which clearly they do, but you have to have very good management. And Bottom Row, I think, has done an outstanding job with them. Over the last 20 years now. I think it's been a little bit over 20 years. And even Sanctuary at the time, for what they had to work with, I think did a pretty solid job with them in the '90s, as best as they probably could for a band like that. So,
right, right.
but they've had very good management, and when I look at the way Bottom Row does stuff with them, I mean, and they do a phenomenal job. And you have consistency within the band with personnel. You don't have a whole bunch of people swapping out like you did in the first 15 years the band existed,
Mhm.
and you have great management, and you get along,
Yeah.
and that's what I think has led to that consistency. But this was the beginning, and
Yes.
it's I describe it as a very fun album.
That's I like that. I like that because I certainly took notice of that the last couple times I spun it this week here, and
Mhm.
because I always liked this album, but like this week, I think this time the last couple times I spun it because I
Yeah,
really dug into the Pink Cream '69 the past year,
yeah,
and it brought a new life to Master of Rings, a different angle, if you will,
yeah.
to and like what we discussed. Obviously Andi coming from Pink Cream, so but yes, very good album, Master of the Rings. Certainly I would say certainly a pinnacle album from the Andi era. So, Tony, let us go to here now to the next album in '96, and that is The Time of the Oath.
Sure.
Talk to me a little bit about if you guys enjoy this content that we're doing here. Please like the video, please share it, and then please subscribe. That helps the channel out so much, just helps everything that we're doing here. And also leave me a comment as well. Always interested to see what you guys had to say. Now let's jump right back into this video.
Well, it was more, I don't know, a little bit more old school sounding, which is
Hmm.
what they were going for. They had the Nostradamus thing going on.
Hmm.
That record, I think, is incredible. That's actually the first album I ever bought by them.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, and honestly, that was the first album. I'll give you a funny story. I had bought a CD pressing of Keeper One in like a used CD shop a couple years before, but I never really listened to it. I got it
Okay.
for like 50 cents. And so I ended up obviously getting into the band in '96 though, and I heard "We Burn," and I loved Andy's voice from the very beginning.
Okay.
But that was the first album that I ever got into by them. It's also, if you go and look at the amount of tracks they recorded, I believe the only album that had more songs, or maybe the same amount of songs as Time of the Oath, as far as bonus tracks go, would be God Given Right. So,
okay.
Time of the Oath was interesting because they took what they started on Master of the Rings to the next level. I mean, they really did. There isn't a song on it that I would go and say, oh my God, that song sucks, or, whatever. I mean, anything my mama don't like, some people don't like that track, but to be honest with you, again, it was an incredible album. People, hailed it as a return to form. They ended up doing really well in every place but the United States, obviously. And they had a lot of bonus tracks on it. Now the reissue obviously has those, but Power was a single.
Right.
If I remember correctly, Wyke said that song, he had a dream he was at a Judas Priest concert, and I believe that's what that song was written about.
Oh, okay.
So there's a lot of great tracks. Mission Motherland is a great song. And that was kind of an attempt to have the entire band, Wyke came up with the idea and the entire band contribute something to it, kind of similar to, like Eagle Fly Free, where you have each person having a solo and stuff like that. It's an incredible album, but it was my first Helloween album.
Okay.
So Power was a single, Forever and One Neverland.
Yes.
That was a single as well off of the record. Time of the Oath was a single off of the album. And this is the first album where Uli started really contributing to the songwriting. You have A Million to One, was one of the songs. It's actually my favorite song he wrote on that album. But again, you have great songs on it. You have We Burn, Steel Tormentor, Before the War, Power, Forever and One Neverland, which, Kiski and Andy do sing together on stage when they play live. If I Knew is probably my favorite song on the album. I know it's an odd one, but yeah, that and Mission Motherland. I love those songs quite a lot, actually.
Would you say Mission Motherland is the epic on this album?
Yeah, I mean, it's a song nobody really talks about. But to be perfectly honest with you, it's an incredible track. I mean, it really is. Kings Will Be Kings. I mean, Wyke probably for me wrote the best. Where like Andy and Wyke kind of really ruled Master of the Rings for me. And then Roland with Still We Go. I would say everybody's songs on it were incredible. It's really hard to pinpoint down, but Wyke kind of ruled the day on that one for me because I loved Kings Will Be Kings. Steel Tormentor was a great song. And just the combination of the songs all of those guys wrote, it was incredible. So I'll show you some of the singles. So this is Power. This had the actual cover. They had Walk Your Way, which is a song I believe Marcus wrote. And you also have a Status Quo cover with Rain. All these are on the bonus track disc on a reissue now. This is the European cover for Forever and One, which has a couple of acoustic songs, kind of similar to Andy's first solo album. This is the European version of Time of the Oath. There was a different cover that has a different cover on it. I forgot to bring it over here. And this is the Japanese version of Forever and One.
Okay.
And the Japanese always want to do stuff different. We'll get into that a little bit with the Dark Ride because there's a lot of weird wonky things they did when it came to that album. But generally speaking, this album was like, Bruce Dickinson on the Skunkworks tour. He ended up opening for them in Europe.
Oh, really? Okay.
He did. Yeah. And so the band really, their audience grew a lot for that album. I mean, it was especially in Japan. Japan, they really did very, very well. So for me, probably one of my favorite albums by the band itself, but that's when they really reestablished themselves, because I remember right before Better Than Raw came out, I was coming up with the idea for my show. And the early message boards, before you had you still had dial-up internet back then, and early message boards were raving about Time of the Oath. So
okay, interesting.
Those are some interesting facts about it. There were the two Japanese bonus tracks were Still I Don't Know and Take It to the Limit. Both of those are really great songs. But they did the Judas Priest cover of Electric Eye that was on there. They had they had an instrumental in Magnetic Fields, which is also a cover. And you had a lot of just cool tracks on that record, bonus track wise.
Now, do you know offhand if this certified anywhere in any country? Time of the Oath.
I think it probably certified in Japan, I'm sure.
Okay.
I don't remember off the top of my head, but I believe it did.
Okay. All right. Because that just blows my mind. Like when you look at Wiki and stuff, like obviously in America, it's not gonna like it actually does surprise me that neither of the keepers like didn't certify, but I mean that's just an underground classic, obviously. But like that just blows my mind. But like even like in other countries, like I feel like I don't ever see any certifications even for these albums, and everyone talks great about these albums, So that just blows my mind.
Well, you get. I don't remember. There's different certifications in different countries. I imagine it did certify somewhere. That information, I never really paid as much attention to that. I mean, I remember one of the guys in the band having a certification for Chameleon in some countries. So I'm sure Time of the Oath. So I'm sure Time of the Oath was certified somewhere.
Okay. All right. Yeah, because like in Japan, you might only need like 50,000. In Canada, you only need like 50,000. Stuff like that.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
All right. So yeah, for me, I'm right there with you. Time of the Oath. It gets better for me over time. Now, when I was young, I loved the singles on here. And like Forever and One, I love that. Like I like ballads, so like I'm right there with it with Forever and One. I love that shit.
Yeah.
And anything your mama don't like, I like that song. Like
I get why.
I get why people, I guess, like don't like it, but it's fun. It's fun. Who cares? We're having fun.
Yeah, yeah. I like the song. I mean, the song didn't bother me back in the day. I'm talking about people's reaction back then.
Yeah.
Obviously, with the fan base, I'm sure more people like it now. But that was the song everybody was knocking on the album on the internet back like 26, 27, 28 years ago.
Yeah, in 1996, that's not a cool song.
But again, it goes into the fact they write a lot of epic songs, power metal songs, and then they write rock songs, and that's one of the rock songs.
Yeah, yep, 100%. And like "Wake Up the Mountain," I don't think we mentioned that one. That's a good song.
That's an Uli. That's one of the songs Uli co-wrote.
Yep. Okay. And yeah, I mean, it is 12 tracks. Now, I will say there are some that I don't care for, but overall, it's strong as hell. Like
what ones do you not care for? I'm just
well,
curious.
I can honestly say I don't remember how Before the War goes. I don't remember how that one goes. It's not on the iPod. And then the other one is I don't really remember If I Knew. I don't remember how that one goes either.
Well, here's what I'll tell you. Before the War, for me, is probably one of the best songs Andi ever wrote.
Really? Okay.
And If I Knew has one of the best guitar solos I've ever heard Wyke play.
Okay. I will revisit those.
It's kind of got a different vibe to it.
Okay.
It kind of reminds me a little bit of Rainbow and maybe some classic 70s stuff, but there's a Hammond solo in it. And then the guitar solo Wyke plays is absolutely incredible.
Awesome. Because I'm a sucker for guitar solos, so like I need to revisit this now. Those two albums. So I will certainly let you know how that shakes out. So, but nonetheless, though, like Time of the Oath is if you say Master of the Rings is like a restart for the band, Time of the Oath to me kind of is like planting their flag that they are like, hey, we were the pioneers of power metal, and we still are.
Correct. Yeah, I agree.
All right, so let's go to 1998 with Better Than Raw. Now, this one, I will say, Tony, this is probably one of the ones that I got last for my Helloween collection. It's just I never really seen any copies for it much. Like this is one that kind of gets swept under the rug, at least from my point of view over here in America compared to internationally. I just never came across it. No one really ever talked about it in my teenage years. Like I just never seen much about it. Can you kind of give us some information on it?
Well, I will tell you, first of all, it is definitely in my top 10 favorite albums of all time.
Oh, shit. Yeah, really?
When we do the ranking, I'm going to spoil it and tell you that's going to be number one on the list. So here's the thing about Better Than Raw. First of all, let's start with the cover. The cover was actually a spoof on the Smurfs.
Really? Okay.
So they were going to do like an old guy Gargamel type of thing, stirring the pumpkins around, and then they decided to do the hot chick on the cover, and that is actually the theme behind the cover of the album. It was actually a kind of a Smurf type thing. That's what it was inspired by. At some point, I'm going to be putting up a lot of old interviews with the band. You know, Andi, I actually had talked to him about that, and Andi was actually the second person I ever interviewed for my show.
Really?
It was like the summer of '98. But anyhow, that album has a lot of firsts for me. First of all, that tour is when I first ended up getting to know them. That was the album, because I did like Time of the Oath, but that was the album that dialed me in as a fan. Like, they instantly with that record became one of my favorite bands of all time. It's also one of the heaviest albums the band has ever done. Every single song on it, all of the main songwriters that wrote the material, Andi, Weike, and Uli, just shined on that album. That's probably the best album as far as Uli's songwriting goes, that for me, in my opinion, that he did with the band. And some of my favorite songs Andi and Weike ever wrote are on that album. So it was there's a lot of great stuff about it. So you have a song in there that's in Latin. That was kind of a thank you song. They did it in Latin because a lot of the places that they play, South America, Mexico, Spain, a lot of these places, it was kind of sort of a thank you. And instead of doing it in different languages, they decided they all came from Latin, and let's write that song. So I'm sure
that's Levate Davinum.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. All right.
And so that is an interesting song. The Japanese bonus track on it was a song called Back on the Ground. It was a song Uli wrote, and actually one of the best solos I've ever heard Weike play is on that track. And then what happened with that album? First of all, they really tried to really push that in the United States. The band did a lot of press for people in the US. And that was also the first year I hosted my show. And I don't think if I didn't meet them, I might not be here doing what I'm doing. But Helloween was one of about 10 bands I met and really hung out with that really inspired me to keep doing this show. So Better Than Raw, incredible record. Everything about it is great. Midnight Sun is a great song. You have Falling Higher, Hey Lord. The singles on the album were I Can, which is a great, again, straight up hard rock song, and Hey Lord, which again is kind of more of a regular rock song as well. But and I have those here. Like, this is the European cover. This is the Japanese cover. Again, the Japanese like to do everything different. Then you had Hey Lord. This would be the European version of it. I think they actually kind of put this out in the States too a little bit. They at least pushed it. And then you have the Japanese cover of Hey Lord. It's different. So they did and I don't know how to pronounce this right, but there was a bonus track called Moshi Moshi Shiki no Uta, which is some kind of Japanese folk song, I guess. They did it live when they were playing live in Japan. There's like a live version of Perfect Gentleman. There weren't a lot of bonus tracks. But then what they did is they put the album out in the United States with a bonus track, A Game We Shouldn't Play, which is the B-side to the I Can single. And they put it out under a record label I've never heard of called Velvel. Just like like all these bands that were from the 80s. Like, I know Anthrax used to talk about this, where they'd be on a record label, then it would be out of business like 6 months later. Well, they distributed it here in the States under that name. So that record did pretty well for them. They opened up for Iron Maiden on the Virtual 11 tour. They played a lot of very big shows when it came to that, but they also played their first US show in like 9 years. And this is where the stories come in, and the funny behind the scenes stuff kind of comes in a little bit. So they came to the United States in December of 1998, not long before Christmas. So I had gotten to know the band. I interviewed both Andi and Weike during the summer. And this kind of goes back in how the whole website thing started too. So back in the days, and I don't know how far back you go, how old you are, but in the old days, in the old days, if you remember, all of the way the internet was now, there was no social media. You didn't have any streaming. What you did is you had message boards and you had people that had websites. They made fan websites to tribute to their favorite bands. Helloween probably had 20 of them. You had a lot of people that did them. And what led to happening during that time is because the internet was so new, these bands were kind of like, well, why don't we have one of these fans run the web page, right? There was a guy named Neil Greggy was his name. He used to run the Iced Earth. Website. This guy named Jason, who I know, who used to run the Blind Guardian website. The guy that runs like the Running Wild, one of the Running Wild social media page, he did their website. You had a guy named Harmon Caldwell, I think, did the Ed Guy website. I still think he does like their discussion board. I could be wrong on that, but you had a lot of people like us doing these things. So the way this all happened, it coincides with the fact that they played in the U.S. So they played in a place called Coney Island High, right? This place was probably as big as your living room. And I can tell you that here's the crazy part about it. So they played there. I had set up a meeting with a publicist to get to meet the band and interview them the next day. It was in Manhattan, where they were in some office building. But I went down there. I met Wyke for the first time outside of the venue. We hung out. We talked a little bit. Then I watched the show. And I can tell you, this venue had people all the way around the block to get in there to see this band. Now, they hadn't played here since 1989. So this is 9 years later. Coming here and played one show. It's the only show this lineup ever played. What's even crazier about it, because the story gets even more insane, they were playing on all rented equipment because customs down in South America kept their equipment down there. And so they came here, rented all their stuff. They eventually ended up getting all their stuff back at some point, but they played on rented equipment in this small, teeny tiny little club that I don't think it exists anymore. But I just remember going. So the way that this went down, ironically, I spoke about Chris Scared, the guy that did the first Helloween website. I went with him, his brother, and a guy named Bill, who does follow my page on Facebook. We all went up to see the band. We all probably didn't have a ton of money, so we were like splitting the hotel room, right? We each bought our flights, and we went up there and we got to meet Helloween. And so the crazy part about it was the very next, so they played the show. The show was very, very good. I remember they opened up with Push, but it was an incredible show. And the fact that they were playing on rented equipment and the show was that good is even crazier.
Yeah.
But so the very next day, we went to this office building in Manhattan, and we got, I'm thinking, now these guys are like rock stars to me. Right. Now, I know that they didn't have a big US following, and I was, for years, man, I used to all I do is talk about them constantly. And I even went so far as to play, we used to do these radio marathons on the radio station in the summer. You're on the air 18 hours playing the same band. I used to do Iron Maiden and Helloween. I used to do them 2 separate days. I even went that far, and I would have them on the show. But funnily enough, I get to this building, and they're in various rooms, like doing interviews in the US, like or on the phone again. Smartphones didn't exist. Right. Cell phones were like $10 a minute back then.
Yeah.
So they're doing interviews, and I got to just hang out, and it really wasn't an interview. It was kind of like I was recording, but we were just like eating lunch and hanging out and talking, and that's when I first met Andi. That's when I first ended up really getting to know Wyke. Wyke and I talked for quite a while, actually. And I didn't think anything of it back then. And so we ended up leaving. We were there for quite a long time, but it was fun. We hung out with them. And it was just a blast. And everything about that whole thing. And I remember when they came here, I kept thinking to myself, these guys have a bigger audience here than they probably think they do. But again, there was really no way to be able to tell that. And they really didn't take the time or take the risk of touring here till Rabbit Don't Come Easy came out.
Yes.
After that. So what ended up happening was, they went home, obviously. And, obviously we're going to start to write for the next record. But to make a long story short, I ended up, Wikey one day just said, "Hey, do you want to do our website?" They had a website that was up, but again, record labels and management people, they weren't really, there was no like plan with most of them to market on the internet because it was so new.
Yeah.
And so he just asked me to do it. And we became friends. And that's sort of how the whole thing started in a sense. It
Okay.
started that day. And then we ended up, just talking. And, over the years, even after I've done it, I'll still help them out with stuff if they need it. But again, they're great guys. The people that management too are phenomenal people.
Right.
I want to keep emphasizing that because just getting to know them over the years is great. The guy that took over the website from me is someone that I found. His name's David. He did their web shop. Him and his wife are incredible people.
Okay.
So it's just a great overall. It's a great group of people.
That's important. That's important to have that.
I don't know Kai or Kiski that well, obviously, but the other guys, they're all great. They're all incredible people.
So I agree with you to an extent. Like this probably, I don't know if I would say is their hardest album because I do feel like some of the later Andy albums, like in the
Yeah,
2010s, were probably the hardest stuff that they ever done, in my opinion. At least from what I've heard of it, and but no, like you said, there is some darker, heavier stuff. But then again, I think on the next album we get a little bit even more darker, if you
yeah.
will.
My message board was named "Don't Spit on My Mind."
Yes, well, that's one of the songs I wanted to bring up because that's a song I really enjoy on here. I've
Hmm.
been really enjoying a lot lately. Time, I've been enjoying
Hmm.
that one. I just like the slow. I like how Andy delivers that song,
Yeah,
his vocals. So, but yeah, I like that. I can, like you said, handful of pain and the Latin song. I love that song. That's a very good song. One of my favorites on here.
if you want a translation of it, I can send that to you.
Really?
I
Okay.
have a
I am
yeah.
gonna be I am interested in hearing this.
I had somebody that used to host another radio show. His name was Dr. Metal. He translated. He's a Latin teacher.
Oh,
So
okay.
he translated that for me and to
Okay.
put on the
Very
site.
cool.
Yep.
Very cool. So yeah, I'm right there with you. Like I said, I don't know if it's my favorite of the Andy, like how you think it is, but I think for 1998, find me a better album, a metal album in 1998 too. For context, even like it's one like we keep saying, Helloween is very consistent band. If you like what they did on one album, chances are you're gonna like a lot within the
Yeah.
10 years radius.
1998 was a great year. That was my album of the year for me.
Mhm.
But you had Rage, Blind Guardian, Gravedigger putting out great records, Bruce Dickinson, The Chemical Wedding that came out.
Yes, yep.
Lots of great stuff that came out. Blind Guardian, Nightfall, Middle Earth. You just had a lot of really good, really, really great albums. And that was kind of where that resurgence of metal really started
Yeah.
finding its foundation because Nuclear Blast, which we're going to about to talk about here in a minute with the Dark Ride, started really establishing themselves a lot.
Mhm.
They had Hammerfall, which also was helped revitalize that because that first Hammerfall album, which could be another discussion down the road as well. But
Yep.
but overall, that year was huge
Yes.
for heavy metal in general. And
Eh
that year of '98 through about 2003 was like the resurgence of power metal.
Mhm.
Is probably safe to say
I
that
agree.
that was because Gamma Ray was doing stuff in the '90s that was good.
Mhm.
Helloween was doing stuff through the '90s that was good. You had a few bands, but it really started to get better after 1998.
Right. And even to your point of just metal in general, like traditional metal in the
Hmm.
early 2000s starting to become cool again, the Renaissance, even in Sweden and like there's Norwegian bands and European bands, glam and sleaze metal was becoming cool again.
Yep.
Like young bands.
I am Jason Myers from the band Icarus Witch, and you are listening to the Krash Kourse Metal Show, featuring Trevor Krash Knight, the next generation's voice of classic heavy metal.
So let us jump into the final album here that we're going to be talking about tonight, and that is The Dark Ride from 2000. So this is on Nuclear Blast, like you said. Talk to me a little bit about this album because this album is probably the most jarring, I would say, out of the four. that we're talking about tonight?
It's either loved or hated.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So we can't talk about the Dark Ride until we talk about Metal Jukebox. Because Metal Jukebox is what led to the Dark Ride. And so let me explain to you a little bit what I mean by that.
Okay.
The band had a record deal still. The management was really looking to get them. The band wanted to get on a bigger label. Nuclear Blast was really coming into their own, doing really, really well. They wanted a better label than what they were on before. So their contract, if I remember correctly, if my history is correct, said they needed one album of recorded material. Didn't matter what it was. So they did the covers album. And that covers album was to fulfill that contract. And what they decided to do is have some fun with it. So you have Metal Jukebox. I'm a little disappointed with the reissue because the 2 bonus tracks should have been on there. But I kind of think that there was probably maybe a legal reason for that. I don't know 100% because BMG did that. BMG did reissue it on vinyl. And by the way, when we talk about Better Than Raw, the BMG reissue of Better Than Raw, if you can find it on vinyl, is absolutely one of the best reissues I've ever seen or heard. It's 180 gram vinyl. Really? The sleeve is really nice. Yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, they did a bunch of covers by bands you would not think they would cover. Now, the Scorpions cover, that's shocking. Jethro Tull, not surprising. But then you do a metal version of an ABBA song. You do Space Oddity, which I think Andi did just nailed that song, in my opinion. Hocus Pocus. So they did all these covers. So they had to do that before they went into the Dark Ride. That album, they were trying to push the band into a direction that wasn't super popular. So when I listened to it, when I rank that album, it's probably one of my least favorite albums because of that.
Okay.
And it's actually the only Helloween album that I like the bonus tracks better than the tracks on the album. I know that sounds weird.
Okay. All right.
But so give you some fun facts. And this is where we're talking about the Japanese wanting to do things differently. For whatever reason, and I don't know why, I mean, it works either way. Mr. Torture was the single in Japan, right?
Yeah.
And you had the single in Europe and everywhere else was If I Could Fly.
Yes.
So in Japan, they had a different opening track on the album than they had everywhere else. Mr. Torture was the opening track. But what they did is they flip-flopped the first song and the second song because the Japanese market wanted to do something a little bit different. And also, if you look at that Helloween logo that's on like the European version of it, it was I don't have it sitting in front of me.
Yeah, not this version.
Yeah. So that is what they did. So just some weirdness there. The Japanese bonus track was Madness of the Crowds.
Oh, is it this right here? Is it this Helloween? Like it's scratched?
Yeah. That's that. So Madness of the Crowds it's an Andi Deris song. It was the Japanese bonus track. It's literally, in my opinion, one of his best vocal performances ever.
Okay.
And then you had Deliver Us from Temptation, which huge departure from what they normally do, but Marcus really nailed that song. So when you go and listen to the album, I think that Mr. Torture was a great song. A lot of people love that track. If I Could Fly was great, but for me, Andi again wrote my favorite songs on the album. Roland wrote a couple tracks on there. The Dark Ride, the title track, is great. And again, overall, it's an incredible record for what it was. But you had a divided band, obviously. Obviously those guys, 2 of the guys weren't there anymore. But you did have some good stuff. So a funny, interesting fact about that: The Departed, Sun Is Going Down, one of Uli's songs. There's actually 2 different versions of it. So if you are familiar with the side project he did called Beautiful Sin.
No.
Okay. So there's a side project he did called Beautiful Sin. And there's a song at the beginning called Lost, and it's actually The Departed with a different name. And the version that is recorded on the Beautiful Sin album was the original way that he actually had written the song, like demoed it before, some changes were made when it actually ended up getting recorded for the Dark Ride. And if you listen really closely to the Dark Ride version, you can hear keyboards that were kind of muted down in the mix a lot.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But those keyboards are actually in the Beautiful Sin version. So there's two different versions. I have not talked to Uli in probably got to be like almost 20 years.
Ooh,
but I do remember an email from him one time explaining, I had talked about it on my show. I talked about the album in an interview, and he explained to me that the song Lost was actually his original version, the way he wrote it. And since he was out of Helloween, he decided, you know what, why don't I record it the way I originally wanted to record it? And that song also has a chick singing on it. That Beautiful Sin album actually has a female vocalist. So,
okay.
But so there's two different versions. Just one has a different title and is in a different project than Helloween. That is usually regarded as one of the best songs on the album. A lot of people love Mr. Torture and If I Could Fly, extremely popular song in the album. And when they did that, what do you call it? The Unarmed thing, where they did like a lot of those acoustic songs.
I love that. Yeah.
That version of the song on there is my favorite. It seriously is.
I like both versions. I like both versions.
Yeah, I like both versions, but that acoustic version that they did on Unarmed was absolutely incredibly awesome. And I you know what I think, hindsight being 2020, would have been cool if they probably did something like that as like a B-side or something like that. But again, having it on an album is cool and they did that as an anniversary thing. But overall, Andi wrote a lot of great songs. Immortal, We Damn the Night, I Live for Your Pain. I mean, the album was actually pretty good, but it has a very cold, very dry production on it. And for me, the whole vibe of the record, I couldn't really get on board with them. So, is it bad? No. But I think when the whole parting of the ways happened, everybody moved on to different things. And, years later, obviously, when you look back at it, it was the right decision for everybody, for that matter.
Right.
I can't speak for Uli, but I know Roland is producing records now for bands. And I've actually discovered a few cool, obscure bands that he has recorded in his studio. So he gets to be at home. He doesn't have to tour, hang out with his wife. He gets to produce records nonstop. And then Helloween is obviously doing incredible things. And they've been consistent ever since all that happened. But Dark Ride, anytime Helloween has been people have tried to push them into something, I think that wasn't comfortable. I don't think the results have ever been great. And right now, if you look at the band, you look at the interviews and everything like that, they're just laid back. They're happy.
Yeah.
Everything has fallen into place for them. But the Dark Ride was definitely an interesting chapter in the band's history, for sure.
Because a lot of bands, when they replace their original singer, especially with the merit and greatness of someone like Kiske, like that's like a death wish, basically.
Yeah,
bringing a new singer, but they beat the odds. They came out with a great slew of albums for years, and just hats off to Andi and hats off to everyone Helloween because of that.
And here's the thing. Andi, I mean, was there always a little bit of backlash? Sure. Yeah, but it wasn't like to the Sammy Hagar, David Lee Roth level or anything like that.
Right.
You're always going to have those people that, you were talking about in the beginning, people that, I've interviewed. And when I interviewed Norm, the new singer for Forbidden, not really a lot of backlash for him. But the reason why Andi Deris's story is so incredible is not only because he replaced Kiske, but his voice is completely different, and they were still successful because of it. Because let's face it, a lot of people focus on that, but the songwriting was good enough to overcome any kind of negativity. I mean, I'm sure they dealt with some, but the songwriting was good enough, and the quality of what they were doing was good enough to overcome all of that. And I can tell you, 5% of the bands are able to accomplish that. I mean, I love Tim Ripper Owens, but he never. They had a couple albums and he was out. Blaze Bayley, same thing.
Yeah.
And again, Blaze Bayley's an incredible dude. I think Tim is an incredible singer.
Yeah.
And sounds closer to Halford, much closer to Halford does, for example, than Andi did to Kiske.
Oh,
So it was, Blaze Bayley sounded like a lower registered version voice-wise to Bruce. He sounded more like David Lee Roth, really. But for Andi Deris to come in, have a completely different voice, and in front of this band, and for the band to come together the way that they did to create what they did in the 90s, it's an incredible story. And it's hard to imagine now when I look back at it, because a lot of people that probably listened to the band maybe got into them later on. I mean, it's been 27 years since Better Than Raw came out. So it's just incredible to look at that kind of story. It's kind of like when you talk about Brave Words and Bloody Knuckles. That magazine ended up getting its name and ended up getting big in the 90s, right? Yeah. So Helloween doing what they did it's just one of those things where you look back at the times and what kind of music scene they had to battle through to be able to get to where they're at now.
100%. 100%. Can't say it any better myself. Amazing job. Now, as far as this album for me, I love this album. I like it a lot. Now, I totally get why, because of the production. It's very, like you said, very dark, very cold. That's a very good term, word to use. Very cold production. I even would go as far as to say like a little bit of an industrial vibe. It doesn't sound industrial, I would say, but it has that vibe there to it. Man, but like if I could fly, to me that's a top 5 Helloween song through the whole catalog. I love that song. I think Andi sounds amazing on it. I love the piano in there. Immortal, love it. We Damn the Night, Live for Your Pain. There's some good stuff, and even the Dark Ride, the title track, very good epic style song.
Yeah.
Escalation 666 is really cool and something a little different for Helloween, I would say.
Yeah.
I could hear it. I could hear this Escalation 666. It would fit on Better Than Raw. But with this production, though, it brings like an extra edge. So, Tony, can you kind of give me your number 4 here for your ranking of
the Dark Ride?
The Dark Ride? Okay. All right. That's I kind of thought that, with how we were discussing.
Sure.
So, for me, I would say I'll have to go with Better Than Raw. I'm sorry, Tony. I have to go with Better Than Raw for my 4th. I love it. I still like it. It's still one that I visit. I do visit more now than I did previously in my life. Like, it does get better over time. But I think I just have a stronger connection to the next 3, I will say.
Well, my connection to Better Than Raw is very obvious from the stories, but I love the album, but you can go to number 3.
Yeah. So, tell me your number 3 here first.
It would be Master of the Rings.
Ooh, that's a very controversial one right there. Okay.
Not by it's a toss up between that and Time of the Oath.
Okay.
But I would probably say Time of the Oath's up there. I give it the nod because it was the first album that got me into the band.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, all right. So
it's hard to rank these. All 4 of these albums, I think, are incredible.
I think so too. It's just, but we just have to do it, Tony. We have to do it. So something is going to have to go to at 4, something's going to have to go at 1. So we just have to do it. So my number 3, Tony, is going to be the Dark Ride. I just tend to find myself visiting. I was super impressed with it, actually, like when I first bought it years ago, because I was expecting something like from 2000, like that sound, which you do kind of get that sound, but I think it works though. But like you said, behind the scenes stuff, there was problems. But
yeah, I mean, people either love or hate the record. Most of the people that dislike the record, I would say more people probably disliked it than liked it. They did not like the direction the band sounded like they were going to go into.
And I get that.
And you have songs that have a darker edge to them. But that album was a little bit different, when it comes to that stuff. So number 3, I mean, it's a good album. For the sake of this interview, believe it or not, I listened to that. I had not listened to that album in like over 20 years.
Oh, really?
And so okay. I finally went and I decided, let's revisit this for the sake of this interview. And I definitely went and listened to it. And then I realized the bonus tracks are my favorite songs on the album.
Okay. All right. Now, would you say the Dark Ride is probably the least power metal album from Helloween?
No.
Okay.
I would say probably Chameleon.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, okay, yeah. Okay, okay, let's of the Andi era.
No, it's I mean, it's hard to say that. I think they're all power metal. Would I
Yeah,
say
okay.
it's the least? I
Mhm.
mean, you kind of had this more direction towards a modern vibe,
Right.
but it's still Andy's songwriting. It's still the couple tracks Wyke has on there. It's still his songwriting. I think the more the stuff that wasn't as the song that really wasn't as power metal would have been Escalation 666.
Right.
And Madness of the Crowds, my favorite song, even though it wasn't on the album, or what Marcus wrote with Deliver Us from Temptation. Those really were probably a little bit of a departure from power metal, but
Okay.
generally speaking, it's hard to say that.
Yeah.
Because for me, when I think of an album that's really not power metal, it's about half of Pink Bubbles Go Ape and most of Chameleon.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say, yeah, probably only like 2 songs are power metal on Chameleon. You know, the rest, as much as I love Chameleon, it's just not a
Mhm.
power metal record, you know?
No,
So, yeah. All right. You just wanted to get your
it's
view
hard.
on
Yeah,
it.
it's really hard to say. I would say that they never really departed from being a power metal band.
Yeah.
That's just me.
Okay. I'm there with you. I'm there with you. So, Tony, give me your number 2.
Number 2 would be Time of the Oath.
Okay. All right. And I'm right there with you. That's going to be my number 2. I think I could have I could have went both ways here with 2 and 1, but I think I will say technically this album probably is better than Master of the Rings, but I think I, Master of the Rings was like my really first album with Andy,
Yeah.
so I kind of have to just
Well,
you know.
years ago, we had this. I had a thing called a song poll,
Mhm,
and I had it set up where people would go on there and pick. They picked their favorite album, favorite side. The albums all ranked, and it
mhm,
had a little graph across, and had the albums all ranked, and then it had each album individually ranked, like not ranked, but like listed on there with all the songs. And then I put like the bonus tracks as one long listing, and people could go on there and just vote. Right? It was just one of those early. It was an early computer voting script,
mhm.
and Master of the Rings was like number. I mean, going all the way back to Walls of Jericho. So this would have been during the Dark Ride.
Okay.
Um, and what would happen is the people would pick that. So actually, Master of the Rings was like number 3 or 4 on that list.
Okay.
Number 3 on that list. So the album was ranked very highly by people.
Mhm.
And it's really hard for me to rank them. I mean, tomorrow I could probably tell you it might be number 1, right?
Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, Time of
Okay.
the Oath is great. The reason Master of the Rings wasn't up there is that the lineup I thought really refined their songwriting
Okay.
after that.
That makes
So
I get that. I
yeah.
can totally hear that and
But
understand that.
Master of the Rings is a fun album.
It is.
It
Very.
really is. It's just a fun record, and it's a more American sounding record. I mean, Wyke will tell you that. I could tell you that. I mean, you alluded to it a little bit, and
Mhm. Especially, like, if someone is a fan of Pink Cream, because like, I covered them on the channel a lot
Mhm.
recently, and that people there are new fans of Pink Cream 69 now, and, like, Master of the Rings is gonna be the next one that I would be like, "Hey, if you like Pink Cream 69, Andi Era, then you're gonna
Well,
like this album."
if you also like Pink Cream 69, if you could find a copy of it, Coming from the Rain, Andi Deris' first solo album, has a lot of Pink Cream 69 styled songs on it that are
Really?
actually, yeah, that album is incredible. Now, has it
Is
been
it
in
hard to
print?
get? Is it still
Um,
in
it
print?
might be hard to get. I'm sure someone threw it up on YouTube at this
Well,
point,
yeah.
uh, but but that album has a lot of that Pink Cream 69 vibe to it.
Okay.
And it's absolutely I remember when that came out, I imported it from Japan, but it is a great album. If you like Pink Cream and you like that style only,
Mhm.
that is an album to check out.
Terry, give me your number 1 then.
What would be better than Raw for
Okay.
obvious reasons?
Yep.
My favorite album cover of all time.
It is a
And
great album cover.
yeah, and just where the band was at musically, that was the band that kind of cemented me as being like my favorite band of all time.
Mhm.
And just the experience of getting to meet them.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't blame you one bit with the stories and getting to
Mhm.
meet them, and I I I would probably put that album number 1 for me then as well, but like I said, I'm going for me, Master of the Rings. Just I remember in high school, man, like I played the shit out of those singles and videos on
Yeah.
YouTube and such, and like just like because like I said, I always wanted Kiss Gay. Like that was the wheelhouse for me for Helloween. But like I said, I still loved Andy stuff. I remember, like I said, As Long as I Fall. I remember when that came out. I was a that was like the first brand new single that I was a part of for
Mhm.
Helloween, and that's absolutely awesome. So like I kind of went back in order, and just Master of the Rings was the first one for Andy. So that's just where I'm going to go, and that's why I'm going to put that number 1. Tony, my man, this has been great. And thanks for the stories. Thanks for talking
Yeah.
Halloween because not too many people talk Halloween, So at least over here in the States, I would say it's getting better. It is getting better, but yeah, certainly still one of those bands that deserve more love over here in the States.
They always have. Yeah, I agree. Definitely one of the better legacy bands out there, both as musicians and, of course, as people.
Yes, good deal. So, Tony, my man, can you tell everyone where they can find you?
Just go to youtube.com/metal command.
All right.
You
All
can
right.
just tag me in the show notes and find me there.
Yes, yeah, I'll put it everywhere that you can find Tony in the description below.
But right now, if you go to, like I said, the website, I just decided I'm redesigning. But
Okay.
if you go to like facebook.com/the metal command, that's the Facebook page. You can go to the actual Facebook page for the show. That's what it is. I do post things there. I will tell you, my show is pretty unfiltered. There is no, like, I pretty much give my honest opinion. A lot of people won't do that,
Right.
but I do. So there's a lot of that. We have some great discussions on there. I'll invite guests. Hopefully, at some point, you would come on and we can talk about, when I start doing the album revisits, it would be cool to have you on for
Okay.
a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, no
But
problem, man.
we talk about everything on the Metal Command. We talk about bands. I do interviews, which is, as I have always told everybody, even if I disagree with somebody or their platform or their viewpoints, I let them come on and I let them tell their story. I kind of let the guest talk without trying to steer them in any real direction, like trying to ask them any kind of loaded questions. I've always been
Right.
a fan of conversations. At some point, I'll be putting up old interviews. I kind of alluded to some interview clips and some things. I'm doing this Helloween kind of 40th anniversary. I'm going to talk about each album
Okay.
individually, in a segment like I did with Gambling with the Devil. But any of those bands I could really go into and just give a lot of insight and even find interviews from those days to put
Very
up on the
cool.
show. And eventually that's going to happen. It takes a lot of time.
It does. It does. It certainly does. That, especially when you got to convert the stuff, then too. If
Yeah.
it's older stuff.
Anything before 2004 was on DAT tape.
Yeah, yeah. That'll take some time. You know, and you have plenty of stuff to convert as well. You have plenty of stuff from the past 20, 30 plus years.
There's easily 1,000 interviews
Yeah.
that I've done, that they're not all on DAT, but to go
Right.
through them all, I mean, just to find, I don't know if you saw the Gambling with the Devil episode, just to find the
Yeah, I
actual
did see that. Yep,
yeah,
I
those
saw it.
interview clips, it took me like a day to find those.
Yeah, I
There it
bet.
goes again.
Yeah.
But anyway, well, at this note, we'll end it here
Yeah.
because this thing's going to be nice. But it was great being on your show. It was a lot of fun,
Yeah, man.
talking about. I don't normally get to talk about my favorite band in this manner with somebody, but it was definitely a blast.
Very cool, man. I appreciate you coming on. So, guys, go check out Tony's YouTube channel, The Metal Command. Great stuff over there. And guys, let us know in the comments what your ranking is of these 4 Halloween albums. So, our rankings. We want to know yours. So, guys, until next time, stay out of that collateral damage. That's Tony. I'm Trevor Crash Knight. We'll see you guys later.
Yeah, I wrote that. It's called I Want to Rock Your Body. And then in parentheses it says to the break of dawn.